Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei Extras. Today, we will be talking about S tiers, we'll be talking about first individuals, we'll be talking about your favorite topics, potentially, if that's your favorite topic, we'll be talking about it. Either way, today I want to talk about S tiers, very, very briefly, because recently, with Block Wars and stuff, there's been some talks, and I think it's very interesting to have a little bit of a conversation and to just get some, different thoughts out there regarding S tiers and their stance within the event scene. But first, as the title and thumbnail may suggest, I don't know what the title and thumbnail are going to be. First individuals in MCC. I decided, because I was bored, to compile a little bit of information, some data of recent MCCs, actually every MCC ever, if we're being honest, every regular MCC ever. I'm not including Magenta E-Trophy because that's not a real event, that's AI generated, so it doesn't count. Either way, let me do this in a way that you can easily read it. There we go. We will be looking at some of the statistics regarding the first individuals of MCC and kind of just having a bit of a conversation from me to the screen and you listening to me regarding S tiers, because I have this personal belief, or at least when making this a bit of information, when compiling this information, I was of the opinion that first individuals and S tiers within the Minecraft event scene weren't that interesting anymore. That is my potential hot take. I don't necessarily fully back that, but I think it is a thought that I didn't just have for no reason, right? In my opinion, it feels like the value of getting first, or the cool factor of getting first, or whatever, right? That like fun, super exciting element isn't lost, but it feels a lot less interesting than it used to. And I think there's a reason for that. But first, let's analyze some interesting things regarding first individual in MCC. The main one, may I say, also, of course, there will be people mentioned in this video that you may not be fond of anymore, so just a heads up if that's something you're sensitive to. Did you know that the last time somebody got first indiv while being on the Red Rabbits was Dream in MCC 22 over 3 years ago? I didn't know that. That's kind of crazy, huh? Every other color has had at least a little bit of representation, whether it's very recently or somewhat recently, right? Lime Team got Fruit Berries in MCC 32 over 2 years ago. Every other color, I think, has had some rep, right? We see like most of literally within the last year, every other color has had a spot on the first indiv board. It's just lime and red that seem to be struggling. Also, did you know that the only time somebody got first indiv without their team being in the top half was when Fruit got the point record in Ender Cup? Isn't that crazy? That's the only, I looked it up. It's the only time that happened. The literally only time that somebody got first individual without their team being in the top half of the event was Fruit Berries in the Ender Cup. The closest, lowest team placement when somebody got first individual was Antfrost, very recently actually, in Pride, and then after that it was Purpled, I think, if I remember correctly. Actually, I can just very quickly do this, Z to A, boom, there you go. These are the lowest team placements. Only 3 times has first individual not been in the top 3 of teams. Isn't that crazy, huh? That genuinely feels like that should have happened more often. It does kind of paint a picture of how MCC is very team focused, right? If you are, if your team does well, you're more likely to do well individually, but also kind of vice versa to an extent. If you are a very strong individual player, it's likely your team will benefit from that to an extent, right? Which is very interesting, very cool. I also came to a realization, very unfortunately, that my GOAT, of course, Techno, had only gotten first in MCC 1 time. I thought this would have happened like a billion times, but he only got it once. This is so sad. Like I thought he got first indiv like a billion times, but clearly not. Clearly I was foolish and I was fooled. So yeah, that's a little bit of fun, silly little information. Also, will say, Sapnap only got it like twice. I thought bro got it like a billion times with how much he was talking, but no, he got it like 2 times ever. The true goats of first Indiv, I mean, recently, obviously, it's shifted to be mostly between, like, Shane, Fine, and Fruit. I would say, obviously, Ant and Purple recently got it, but Shane, Fine, and Fruit are the ones that have been bagging that first Indiv a bit more recently. I think Fine, obviously, a lot less often, but that's also due to the less frequent appearance to an extent, and also arguably the team balancing. But yeah, very interesting to see the board of first individuals here. Another thing to mention regarding first indivs in MCC is that you're kind of, at least as of recent, seeing the same people kind of compete for that first indiv slot, and I think that's probably where my opinion of things feel kind of not as interesting anymore comes from, because this is what Block Wars is kind of, doing right now. If you look at Block Wars first indivs, again, sorry, you're going to see some not so fun people sometimes. One time. Well, the one person. Either way, you kind of look at the most recent, or all the first indivs, and it's a lot of Feinberg. There's like a few Shanes, there's a few Purples, there's a few Camans, but like, again, it's Feinberg, it's Fire Breathman, and it's Purpled. Occasionally you get an Antfrost, very fun. Guess what? This roster didn't have Shane, Fine, or Purpled. I still think Ant played well, but that's the only way that was possible, really. It's the same names you see here, and if you expand outwards, they are some of the names you'll see in something like PB or something like whatever, right? Like, they're just very good Minecraft players, and I think that kind of paints a bit of a picture of the current state of Minecraft events and diversity in terms of strong performances, right? There are just players that are that good at Minecraft that other people can't really compete. And, funnily enough, I say this like, oh, these people feel like they're always the ones getting first, blah, blah, whatever. I look at early MCC, and really it was just Pete and Quig. It didn't matter then, because obviously Pete and Quig just played MCC, didn't play anything else because there was nothing else, so that wasn't really a quote-unquote problem. I also don't think it's that much of a problem. It's just, I have an opinion and I would like to share it. I don't necessarily think it's a problem. I just think it's interesting to talk about. It just feels like, these people, Shane, Fine, Fruits, to an extent Purpled, Ant's part of that too. Sandwich, of course, is not really a regular MCC player, but his name is on the board, right? Are people that you see in other events very frequently as well, and you see do well in other events frequently as well. So them having a pop-off doesn't feel as special anymore. It doesn't feel as interesting. And I think this kind of bleeds into the conversation topic regarding Block Wars, where recently some people have expressed that they don't, they don't find the events as interesting anymore. And of course, as much as I don't agree, I should probably and have considered, why would that be the case, right? Why do people feel like that? You could argue it's the frequency of events, totally valid reason. You could argue it's what's it called? It's maybe that some of the games just aren't that interesting to them. That's totally fine as well. I think it's also partially because of the base expectation and just the default approach that an audience has to an event. Because as much as I could be of the opinion, and partially am of the opinion, that like it's not that interesting to see the same people be the ones doing the best, especially when you look at something like the most recent MCC. Yes, it's very cool to see all the top MCCS tiers all in the same roster pretty much, right? Like, you have everybody is there, which is cool. I love that. But very often it is a situation where like these S tiers, your best players are gonna be the ones always doing the best, right? Duh, but like still, it's all that first indiv slot isn't as mysterious anymore. You kind of know who it's gonna be to an extent. It's not one person in MCC, at least. Like, it's not like Feinberg runs it down in MCC every time as much as he has in Block Wars, historically speaking. I think the problem is more prominent in Block Wars, by the way, before anyone complains or says that I'm like just a hater to hate. I'm not hating, by the way. I'm just talking about my opinion. I think Block Wars has this issue more than MCC does, but MCC has it as well, where like first indiv doesn't feel like it matters as much anymore. The only time first indiv in Block Wars is usually interesting is when Feinberg is playing and he doesn't get first indiv, which I guess is cool, but that doesn't happen very often. And I think one moment where first indiv in Block Wars was more interesting was when Kamen was an active player, right? Because this in particular is an example of a new creator essentially being thrown into the mix, right? Unexpected pop-off creator. They do so well and they can shoot for first indiv and it's exciting again. It's like, wow, this is a new person we're seeing pop off in these events. Of course, now that Cam has decided to essentially retire from playing Minecraft events, we don't see him anymore, but I do think, yeah, generally speaking, again, like mentioned, it's very refreshing to get somebody new, and I think that's very cool. Now, in MCC, unfortunately, when you have instances where that, new first indiv player appears, it's a bit of a quote-unquote gimmick, you could say, right? In Pride, Ant, again, plays well, but of course, in Pride, generally speaking, some of, if not all of the other top S tiers are missing, so he is the statistical best player that will be participating. In MCC Twitch Rivals EU, you get Sandwich Lord, which is very exciting, but there are not really any other top S tiers for him to compete with. You see like Plushie, which is of course Rising, Coldy, similar situation, although I would say with Coldy it was quite interesting because there were a lot of other good players involved, right? You had Shane, you had Fruit, and of course I was there too. I competed, Sandwich Lord was there too. Hey, we were there, we were competing. But it feels like when, at least as of the past, literally since the inception of Season 4, really, anytime first indiv doesn't go to one of the expected people, it's because of a gimmick, essentially, right? Like there's really not much that could have otherwise happened. It's obviously going to be somebody else because in this situation, Coldy, is a PvP player in an event with survival games on a very heavy PvP team. Sure, of course he's going to do well. Sandwich Lord is solo representing the Esters pretty much in the said event. Like, of course. So yeah, that's it. I've rambled my ramble. S tier doesn't, or sorry, first indiv doesn't feel as special anymore. That's the take. Also, fun stats, right? Very interesting. But yeah, I think Laguna had a really good take on this as well, which is just speaks on the event community to an extent. Again, not necessarily criticism of the event community, but more so a conversation topic because I feel like it's a very difficult. It's a bit of a position where it feels like the event community is stuck to an extent, and it doesn't really feel like there is much that can be done to venture outside of that. But Laguna mentions here, the discussions surrounding events focuses mainly on the top 10 players. The clip channels and compilations focus mainly on the top 10 players. The team predictions focus on mainly the S tier players, and the community as a whole condenses around mainly the top 10 to 20 players. That's what the community has indicated they want, and that's what the staff of Block Wars and many other events have been forced to cater to. This is pretty much the case, right? Of course. For the majority of the time, when you look at me responding to the community or looking at Reddit discussion, you're always going to see people ask about, but where are the S tiers? But where is this and this and that? Very few times will that discussion surround non-S tiers, right? It's not like people are going to be asking, where are the bottom frags? Like, where are they at? Like, that's not something they're concerned with. They care more about, like, I want to see the best players play in this Minecraft tournament. And I think to an extent, no, okay, by default, totally fine, makes sense. Of course you want to see the best players. If I'm watching the World Cup and I see Portugal play, of course I want to see Ronaldo on the field or whatever, right? Of course when France is playing, I want to see Mbappe. Like, of course, right? That makes sense. But it's a different situation, not the best one-to-one comparison. To an extent, when it is always the same people doing the best, and when that is what everyone revolves stuff around, it is very difficult to expand upon an event, when to branch out, to get more stuff out there, more conversation going, etc., etc. Because I feel like that's something that's to an extent been lost. This was partially prevalent back in the day with MCC. I would say that one of the main reasons for that is that generally the skill level was just a little bit lower on average. Of course, when you look at some of the stats that I have brought into the equation here, you know, this is gonna sound really interesting, of course, but around the time when MCC was, losing a bit more momentum, people like Dream and Sapnap lost interest in playing, etc. You see somebody like Shane, for example, get a chance to play, and he, of course, is very good, but you kind of see the standard shift, right? You go from somebody like Dream or somebody like Sapnap, who, of course, in MCC is a fantastic player, or was at least a fantastic player, but, like, in reality, wouldn't stack up against Shane, or wouldn't stack up against Feinberg, but, like, this type of player doesn't really exist anymore. And I think that's one of the main things that's very interesting about how things used to be, is, like, you have participants who have a bit more variance, right? Of course, they can have a first in-div moment, but you just see a little bit more variety in the sense of, like, who can get first in-div, right? Literally, in this whole span of events, I'll just grab from, like, here on, roughly, right? This whole span of events, I'll actually, oh, that's not what I wanted to do, thank you. From MCC 20 onwards, I guess, right? From MCC 20 to MCC 28, you see a pretty good amount of variance in terms of who gets first indiv across the board, right? Of course, in something like Pride, it makes sense that Illumina would have gotten it. And of course, in Underdog, Shane was going to get it. But everyone else is pretty much a unique name across the board. Very exciting, very interesting. It showcases, like, hey, oh, there's potential for anyone to really get it. Whereas if you look at, like, Season 4 onwards, sure, you have a variety of names. But again, with a quote-unquote gimmick of Pride, and with something like Rising taken out of the equation, and something like Twitch Rivals, where the roster is, of course, a little bit more exclusive, you're getting a bit more repetition in terms of who is getting first. That's it. That's the topic. So let me know your thoughts. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not me saying we need to get rid of the S tiers or saying we need more different S tiers. I'm just saying, hey, this is something regarding the current situation of the event scene. Maybe this is something that could be experimented with, right? Of course, very difficult. These are some of the people that the audience cares the most about. It's very difficult to not have them involved in an event very often. Block Wars is probably one of the events that would be able to, push in this direction a bit more. We see this in the upcoming MCC roster. If I very briefly try to pull it up, this upcoming MCC roster for Rivals has the opportunity to invite certain creators a bit more than others. Which results in a roster that feels super fresh and interesting, because look at the S tier situation. Yes, of course, first individual is probably going to go to Purpled or Fruitberries or whoever, right? But still, overall, you have so much more variance, so much more opportunity for certain people to have pop-offs, etc., because your supply of creators is more widespread. And that's interesting. And I think that's cool. Hopefully we'll see more of it. I think it's very interesting. I think it's nice, and I hope to see more experimentation with this type of roster. I will say, of course, I do feel bad for the S tiers that would potentially end up being excluded from events more often if this were to be an approach that an event decides to take. But I do think for the general experience of events across the board and for everyone involved, I think it would be quite interesting to have less S tier presence every now and then. I don't think they should be, excluded from events permanently in any way, but I think it would be really interesting if we saw some more opportunities like Block Wars 17, where other people can have major pop-ups, where things can get really interesting. Either way, let me know your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you later. Goodbye.